and welcome to my easy to understand guide to men like Mobeen and industry. This video is going to be particularly relevant for you if you are studying the Eduqas GCSE Media Studies specification, as it appears as one of these set texts on the Component 2 paper. The set episode for study is Season 1, Episode 2, but for the industry question, it might be useful to know quite a broad overview about the series, so I'm going to talk about both the set episode and the series in general. The character of Mobeen was developed by the writer and the star of the show, Guz Khan. He actually developed the character on YouTube as a kind of comedy sketch that he used to do. And it got quite a lot of recognition. People enjoyed the sketches. He got quite a few views. And this kind of shows the power of online media now and how companies are finding their audience. He was noticed by a kind of quite a predominant production company. It's a production company called Baby Cow, which is actually owned by Steve Coogan, who's quite a famous comedian. And they actually hired Guz Khan to kind of make a pilot for the series to kind of turn it into a TV show. The pilot episode that they made helped get the notice of BBC, who ended up picking it up and financing Tiger Aspect to make a full series. The show was produced by Tiger Aspect. Tiger Aspect is a subsidiary of Endemol Shine UK, which used to be one of the biggest TV production companies in the world. However, it was bought out by an even bigger company, Banijay. And so this means that the actual companies involved are really quite big. That gives them access to a lot of resources, a lot of money, and quite a good reputation within the industry. Tiger Aspect themselves as a production company have a huge history of making big British programmes, and in particular sitcoms. Some of the sitcoms they've made in the past you will recognise the names of, things like The Vicar of Dibley, Mr Bean, and that gives them a big reputation for comedy in the industry, and it means that they're very, very experienced in making this kind of stuff. The series was produced for BBC Three, which at the time was an online streaming only channel. It used to be a TV channel and was primarily aimed at young people aged kind of 16 to 35 and used to make predominantly comedies and documentaries. However, due to budget cuts at the BBC, the channel was taken off air and then became online only streaming channel. Online channels like BBC Three means that content has become increasingly fragmented and more niche. They can have more and more channels to target specific audiences, and so our content is becoming more diverse. Guz Khan wasn't the only writer. He also was joined by a man called Andrew Milligan, who had also written comedy sketches for people like Ant and Dec. So quite a kind of good reputation of working in the comedy industry. And they won multiple awards. So they actually won in 2020 awards for Best Writing. They won BAFTAs for Best Acting, Best Comedy. So the show has done quite well. Although it began on BBC Three, the show picked up popularity quite quickly, and lots of the sketches and scenes from the show ended up being shared online, and that gathered them an even bigger audience. And so later on, BBC decided to put the series onto BBC One as well, which just kind of shows that it became a lot more popular than they thought it might do at the beginning. And then later on, they also licensed the content to Netflix too, so you can actually stream it on Netflix. And that's a great way of reaching more modern, younger audiences, and also reaching a more global audience too. Of course, BBC Three being an online streaming channel that you can access via iPlayer means that this show can be accessed by a global audience too. So it's a good way of reaching quite a broad demographic. It's important to know some history about the BBC in general for this. The BBC, as I've said before in many other videos, is a public service broadcaster. That means that they are funded by public money via the licence fee rather than by advertising. And what this means is that they don't have to make really popular mainstream content to try and bring in audiences to please advertisers. They can make more niche content targeted at quite niche audiences. So perhaps a show like Man Like Mobeen may not be made by a more mainstream commercial channel. They may see it as too niche and therefore too big a risk. Whereas the BBC can take these risks because they're funded by public money. As a public service broadcaster, the BBC have a royal charter that guides their remit, i.e. rules that they have to follow really in order to keep getting this public licence fee money. Their main remit is that they need to inform, educate and entertain. That means that they can't just have programmes that are all fun and games and lots of entertainment. There has to be something informative and educational on their channel too. This show, obviously being a comedy show, is going to be entertaining. It's going to be full of jokes and fun, and audiences are going to laugh. So this absolutely fulfills the entertainment part of their remit. However, some might see it as informative and educational as well. It might inform and educate audiences about cultural issues, about race issues, religious issues, and so it may also fulfil the informative and educational parts of their remit too. Another part of the BBC's remit is that they need to reflect the diversity in Britain and regional areas within Britain as well. And so actually choosing to make a sitcom that's got a predominantly Asian cast, that focuses on sort of like Muslim-based issues, Asian issues, is a great way of fulfilling that part of their remit. And the fact that it is set kind of up north in a more regional area of Britain and not in those kind of very famous like London, southeast areas of Britain that often get shown in the media, also helped to fulfil that part of its remit. The BBC even had a training fund which allowed them to employ working class people from Birmingham, in particular from diverse ethnic backgrounds, actually on the crew. So it's really important to the BBC that they kind of really plough themselves into this idea of diversity, regional identity and representation, because that's part of the reason why they get our licence fee. Because the show was mainly shown on iPlayer on BBC Three to start with, most of the marketing took place online. So they would advertise the series on iPlayer, they would promote the fact that it was available as a box set, and they would use social media to share clips from the series too. Interviews with the cast and crew were carried out on radio stations like the BBC Asian Network, which is specifically designed to target that niche audience. Now, regulation of TV in Britain is done by Ofcom, and you can check out my separate video about Ofcom and regulation if you wish to. That means that they are the people responsible for checking the content on TV and for making sure that they deal with any audience complaints. And they have lots of rules about what you can and can't have. And Men Like Mobeen is obviously quite a light-hearted sitcom, but it does sometimes contain some more adult jokes or some kind of scenes that perhaps younger children might find offensive or might not understand. And of course, with when it is on a kind of traditional TV channel, Ofcom have the Watershed at 9 p.m, which is a kind of imaginary time where we assume that a lot of younger children are going to be in bed. So showing the series after 9 p.m. Would be a good way of ensuring that young children aren't exposed to any content that might be seen as offensive or as too adult or graphic. However, with it being available on streaming sites and BBC Three and iPlayer, this kind of idea of the watershed doesn't matter anymore, because of course online you can get hold of that programme at any time of the day. And so it does perhaps highlight some of the issues to do with regulation and how we cannot necessarily protect children as well online for streaming sites as we can with traditional broadcast TV. It's also interesting to note that Ofcom have absolutely zero power currently to regulate Netflix. So the content on Netflix could be graphic, it could be more adult, it could be more offensive, and audiences are unable to complain about it to Ofcom at all. However, Netflix do offer some content warnings about the show on their site. So that was my easy to understand guide to Men Like Mobeen and the TV industry. Don't forget to check out my channel for more videos that might be relevant for you, and hit subscribe for updates on anything else that I've got coming out soon. And if you've got any questions or comments, leave a little comment below and I'll see what I can do.